And I'm John Papa.
And I'm Phil Haack.
Hey, thanks for coming, Phil.
Oh.
Thanks for coming, Phil.
Oh.
I left you hanging.
Well, you went like that, and I thought you were reaching for a handshake. I was like, oh, you did. Okay.
Today we're going to talk about 5 things about GitHub. And I'm John Papa.
And I'm Phil Haack.
Hey, thanks for coming, Phil.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Hey, high five. All right. So about GitHub. I've been using GitHub for years. I know you've been there almost since the beginning. Is that right?
Yep. Well, not from the beginning, but I've been there 6.5 years and quite a long time.
Yeah. So you know just about everything there is to know about GitHub, right?
Yeah, I wish.
All right. So a couple of things about this episode is you're going to teach us some things that maybe most people don't know about using GitHub, such as white space.
Yeah. So if you've ever used GitHub pull request feature or diffs, you know that like white space changes, sometimes you want to ignore them, and there used to be this hack that people would do where you added $W=1, and what that meant was ignore white space. The problem was you couldn't comment on PRs when you did that, but recently we fixed that by adding an actual UI element. So now when you're looking at a pull review, there will be diff options, and you click that button and it brings a drop down and it gives you an options to either use unified or split diff, and also gives you an option to ignore white space. And the best part is if you ignore the white space, you can still comment on pull requests. It retains that information.
And that makes people who are reviewing open source pull requests lives much easier, right?
Absolutely. You can focus on what the content of the changes, and I recommend applying linters to deal with the white space differences.
Great. Thing number 2, project board automation. So in GitHub, is this to help with like issues and PRs that can mount up in your projects?
Yes, if you're a project team, whether you're working on open source or on internal project, managing sort of when things happen and all that can be challenging. So what not a lot of people know is that GitHub has project boards, which are kind of like Trello boards or Kanban boards is what some people call them. Mm-hmm. And you can put items in swim lanes. But what's really cool is when you create a board, there's now project automation as well. So you can say like, oh, when this issue is closed, automatically move it from this column to this column. And what's really neat also is that a lot of real projects actually consist of a lot of different repositories. And so you can have one project board have a card that represents the status of another project board by simply creating a note and cut and paste the URL of the other project board. And then that card will stay up to date with the other project board. So for example, if you had like a node project and you were also working on some dependencies, you might have cards for each of the dependencies that point to their project boards.
Oh, very cool. And we can learn about that here from the link?
Right here.
Awesome.
Am I going to get a Snapchat filter if I misbehave? Right?
Probably, yes.
Good.
Thing number 3, GitHub Desktop. I haven't used this recently, so tell me what's changed and what's there.
So the last time you used it, we were 2 apps, one for the Mac, one for the Windows, written in native technologies like WPF and C# on the Windows side, Objective-C, Swift, and Cocoa on the Mac side. And a couple years ago, we rewrote it in Electron. So for those who don't know, Electron is a cross-platform desktop technology based on Chromium and Node, so that you can use your web technologies to build a client application.
And apps like Atom, VS Code, and Slack are built on Electron, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we rebuilt desktop on it, and now it runs on Mac and Windows, and there's a community effort to run it on Linux. And what's really cool about it is it gives you a nice visualization for like creating commits, especially even if you're someone who is really proficient in the command line, you might use the desktop app to create partial commits. You might use it to check out a pull request, for example, because now our branch dialog lists pull requests. So you can say, oh, I just want to check out that pull request and check it out. One of the other nice things about it, if you're a command line user, is if a lot of times you're running commands in the command line, like you're a node and you're running npm run, you can write GitHub space dot, and dot represents the path. So you can be any path, but dot would be the current directory, and that'll launch GitHub Desktop to the current directory and add that repo if it's not already tracked. So that's a quick way, like I'm working on npm, I'm ready to commit my changes, run GitHub dot, select all the things you want to commit, create a commit, and then there's a menu to publish a pull request. So
awesome.
All from desktop.
Great, and we can get it from here?
Yeah, right there.
Right there.
Oh, there.
Okay.
Yeah, right there.
Somewhere.
Somewhere. Right there. Right there.
I'm just doing it because I wanted to clap. I felt left out. Thing number 4. You recently extended GitHub to accomplish something. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I wanted to add sentiment analysis for issue comments on GitHub, and I wanted it as a proof of concept. The idea is you might want to know, for example, what is the overall sentiment of comments on your repo, and like, is there things you can do to keep it more positive? And so what I did is use a combination of GitHub extension points along with some Azure and Microsoft extension points.
Cool. Thing number 5. What's step 1 in creating this?
Well, the first thing I did is create a webhook. So GitHub repositories have an extensibility point where you can set up a webhook to send a payload based on events that happen within GitHub, like a new issue is created,
Issues, PRs,
all that stuff. You need something to receive that webhook, like a service, and setting up a whole service for a webhook can be kind of a pain. And I thought, I want to check out this new serverless thing, and so I tried out an Azure function. And part of the reason is that I had heard that Azure functions specifically support GitHub webhooks. So when you create a function, you can say this is for a webhook, and it actually stubs out the method where the argument to the method is the GitHub payload.
Right.
And it gives you the URLs that you need to post in your repository settings, and then you're all set. You're up and running.
So functions aren't just for HTTP backends. You can also use GitHub webhooks. That's
Yep.
great. Thing number 6. Somebody posts an issue and you have to analyze the text. How do you do that?
Well, I thought about hiring 1,000 people to review every issue as it came in, but what I realized was there are some really interesting AI out there, or machine learning algorithms that can do that, but I don't know how to do that stuff, so I looked at Microsoft Cognitive Services, and they have really cool, distinct services that are very specific and focused on accomplishing a task. And so I called it textual analysis service. And what's nice is I could use NuGet within Azure Functions to get the API, use that to call that service, do the text analysis, and then that would tell me whether the sentiment of the comment was positive or negative.
So basically there's an API with Cognitive Services where you just pass in, here's the text, and it tells you kind of what that sentiment looks like.
Exactly. It even tells you what language the text is in if you needed that information. So it's really cool.
Very cool. Thing number 7. Once you've figured out what the sentiment is, what do you do with it?
Well, so what I wanted to do was update the comment with the sentiment score, but I do this as a proof of concept. I highly recommend not having a robot admonish people for being negative or positive.
Right.
But as a proof of concept, I wanted to update the comment, and so what I did was I used OctaKit, which is our client API. We have one for C# and other languages, and use that to call our GitHub's web API. So we have an API for that gets you access to just about any data in GitHub. We also, I want to put a plug in, we also have a new GraphQL API. So that's starting to get fleshed out and gives you a lot more info. But with that, with OctaKit, I was able to just find the comment, find the issue that it was on, and then update that comment with a sentiment score. And if you go to this URL, you can see it in action.
Is that to your blog post?
No, this one is to the blog post.
Oh, that's the blog post.
Yeah,
and
this
that's
one,
the one to the OctaKit?
That's the repository where I set up this webhook, and if you post a comment to it, it will show you the sentiment score.
Bonus thing, not everybody has your personal email address, which is right here, by the way. So how do people keep up with changes in GitHub?
So the great news is we have a new changelog, which is a log of changes.
Really?
Yeah, and if you go to this URL right there, you'll see all the new features that are coming or that have recently been released from GitHub. So it's a great way to keep track of all these new things, because I know it can be hard to keep track of.
Excellent. Hey, Phil, thanks for coming in. This has been great.
It's been my pleasure.
And this has been 5 things about GitHub.